Untitled Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. These beautiful plantation homes reflect the fascinating history of our culture and cuisine, and I'd like to share this story with you. Why not join me and some of my friends as we visit the plantation homes of our state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana?
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Louisiana Gold and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
It's been said that every man's home is his castle. When Judge Henry Brie's daughter married Robert Layton in the late 1800s, they decided to continue work on his beautiful Mulberry Grove plantation. When Robert died suddenly at age 29, Eugenia decided to pack up the 3 children and head off in grief to Europe. Having been inspired by the great chateaux and estates of that country, she decided to hurry back to Monroe and convert Mulberry Grove to the most unique plantation home in North Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse. Welcome to Layton Castle. When looking at this home, it's hard to imagine that this magnificent castle totally envelops the tiny Louisiana raised cottage originally built here in 1814. Complete with red tile roof, turret, and tower, it's easy to see that this building was inspired by the European castles and Romanesque architecture that Eugenia came to love while living in Switzerland. The castle is built of pink brick, and one of the more interesting features is this glassed-in drawing room overlooking the Ouachita River. The frosted glass in this curved window is original to the house, as is the fabulous brickwork visible here in the arches of the porte-cochere. One of the more peaceful spots on the property is the family graveyard located right behind the house. Included here is the tomb of the builder, Henry Brie. This brick outbuilding, one of the oldest in Louisiana, originally served as a storage shed for the silkworm business that was run on the property. On a sad note, Judge Brie never lived to see this Monroe landmark completed. What a beautiful plantation home in North Louisiana. Originally, that home was called Mulberry Grove and named after all of the mulberry trees that Judge Henry Brie brought onto the property, thinking that he was going to cultivate a silkworm business and thus creating silk from the Americas for export to Europe. Unfortunately, the idea never worked, and it was over 100 years later that the family converted that original Mulberry Grove to Layton's Castle. I tell you, it's a great place to visit. It is open, but you have to make appointments to get in. The second floor of that home is one of the most magnificent art galleries of family portraits you will ever see. So give them a call and go on to visit. Well, my guest in the kitchen today is going to be someone who knows a lot about North Louisiana. Governor John McKeithen. Everybody knows him. He was governor of Louisiana for many years. There's a lot of things that he has to his credit, and he's going to come in and talk to us a little bit, not only about plantation life, but about things that happened in Louisiana during his administration. And he lives just about 30, 40 minutes down the highway from Layton's Castle, so you don't want to miss this. Well, the foods of that area. Now, we know good and well that the influence of North Louisiana is a little bit more of the Spanish and English rather than the French and German of the river down in South Louisiana. So as we look at some of the foods that were cooked in those kitchens, we see some similarities, but then at the same time we see a lot of differences. But one of the similarities is pork. It seems that pork was so important in plantation cookery that no matter what culture you came from, pork was going to be in the pots, maybe treated just a little bit differently. It seems that pork was actually brought into the country by the Spanish many hundreds of years ago, and until that time there was no pork here at all. But then they kind of went wild in the woods and a lot of wild boar, but then eventually domesticated. And today we have a great pork business in America. But let's take a look at this platter I have here of all these different ingredients. This is a little pork chop, a little bone-in chop. This, of course, is the best of all of the pork items. This is a tenderloin, very, very tender. And, of course, the loin. This is where the chops come from once it's deboned. And here I've cut this loin into some really nice, this is about, what, 3/4 inches thick. This is a nice little loin chop. And I'm going to make a tomato braised pork cutlet. And I'm going to fire up my little skillet here because I want to make sure it gets good and hot. I'm going to put just a touch of oil in it because, of course, you want to cook with, again, whatever oil you like. You don't have to put too much. Use some of those low cholesterol oils, and you can cut all the excess fat off of the pork as well. It'll be a nice lean meat. I'm going to season these cutlets. I'm going to put just a little bit salt. Of course, you can put whatever you want, put whatever herbs. It doesn't really matter. Again, all the different cultures season things a lot differently in Louisiana. I'm going to put some cracked pepper because I always like to put a little bit of that cracked rather than the cayenne. It's a little bit too hot for me, so I'll put a little touch of that. And then I can sprinkle some Louisiana pepper sauce right on top of the cutlets because this is going to be tomato braised, so there's going to be some really nice spice in this pot, more, I guess, from the Spanish influence. Go ahead and kind of dust this around a little bit. Now, of course, you can put this in flour. Put a little flour on it. It'll keep it from getting too dried out. But if you're going to do a little braise, just go ahead and drop them right into the black iron skillet. Look how pretty these are. And again, you don't want to overcook these. This is a white meat, a lot like chicken, so you don't want to overcook them in the saute stage. You want to brown them nicely, sear them so that we can keep the juices on the interior. But remember, it's going to be a slow braise, so they'll be nice and tender. Once we kind of get them in there and start to sear them, look at here, I can turn them over. There's nothing better than the smell of sauteing pork cutlets, a really nice smell. And I think this is where the original grillades dish of New Orleans came from. When you go to any of these great restaurants for brunch, you're going to get grillades and grits. A lot of people think that's sauteed veal, but in early Louisiana, it was sauteed pork cutlets, just like this, with a really nice, rich tomato sauce. Assuming that these will have cooked here for a couple of minutes and got nice and brown, I'm going to dust all of these other things, sprinkle in some fresh tomato. This is just chopped tomato. I'm going to put some onions. After all, we want to get that good Louisiana flavor. Celery. Put all kind of nice things in here. You don't have to follow my recipe, even though it's a pretty good one. Just use your own imagination. Of course, garlic. Have to have that good garlic in there. And I'm going to sprinkle in some mushrooms. I love mushrooms on these pork cutlets. Look how pretty this is. Really, really nice, colorful dish. If you take a look at that, and I'll spread all of this around, just like that. And you can continue to turn them if you want to. But now, I'll go ahead and I'll put the tomato in. I can put either fresh tomato sauce, tomato juice, or whole tomatoes if you want to just do that. But of course, just put some processed tomato sauce. It's going to be really nice, about that much. And I'm going to put just a little sprinkle of stock. I'm going to put a little touch of chicken stock in here and use this spoon to stir it all around. And I would cover this up. Look how that's boiling away. And I would put a nice heavy cover on this, and I could either go right into the oven at about 350 degrees, or I could actually just hot roast them, so to speak, on top of the stove. Now, I'll move this one out of the way because I have one already done. Just get this heavy skillet right off of that fire, and I want you to take a look at this. Let me lower that fire. This is good. Oh, boy. Take a look at this pot, if you would. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? A really nice big old pot of these pork cutlets that's been sauteing here for just a couple of seconds. And look how nice and juicy they are, nice and tender. I want to plate a couple of these up for you. Look how tender. They're almost falling apart in that skillet. They've probably been cooking here, I said a couple of seconds. This has been cooking here probably for about 30 minutes to get nice and tender. But look at them. They've kept their shape really nicely. And of course, I can put some of that great tomato sauce right on top of the cutlets like this. And you know what I would do? I would serve this next to a big platter of grits. Take a look at that. I'll move this off of the fire. I could put this on grits or on some rice or whatever I felt like actually serving it with, but I would always garnish it with some of this nice carrot, purple cabbage, all of these things. I can imagine this on a nice big platter of grits, just as they probably did it at Layton Castle many years ago. Isn't that nice, the braised pork cutlets? I'll move that right out of the way. And the next dish I want to do for you, again, is a dish that was done often at Layton Castle, and this is a dish that I found to be really interesting, and in fact, we cook it a lot today. It's a Brie cheese, crab, and Bermuda onion soup. And, of course, you can use any crabs that you would want in this particular soup, but you can go into the supermarkets today, and there's a lot of crab available, some very inexpensive at different times of year, some very expensive if you're looking at the jumbo lump. But here in Louisiana, if you look on my platter, I like to use, look at these beautiful lumps of jumbo crab. Take a look at this. But the more inexpensive claw crab meat here, you can find just about in any store, frozen most of the year, but the most tasty of all of the crab meats, if you ask me, and this is the surimi. This is that, they say fake crab meat. Well, I don't know. It's got a great crab flavor, but it's made with fish. But any one of these will work very well. Here's the Brie cheese right here on the platter as well. To make this soup, I'm going to begin with just a little bit butter, or buttery flavored oil, I should say. I'm going to put it down into the bottom of my little pot. And once that comes to a heat, you can see that this is sizzling already. I'm going to add all of those great Louisiana flavors again. I'm going to put a little touch of onion, celery. This is going to be made with the red Bermuda onion, so I don't want to put too much onion. Bell pepper, but it's a cream soup, so I'm going to add the pretty colored peppers. I'm going to add these pretty red bell peppers, as well as some of these diced carrots. And I'm going to just kind of move all of that around. Get this wooden spoon, and I'll just stir all of this down into my black iron pot. I'm going to also add, obviously, a little bit garlic. Put a little touch of garlic down in there. Continue to stir this around to get that good flavor. And now I'm going to add my red Bermuda onions. They're very sweet. You can find them everywhere. And, of course, just keep them in strips because I think they look a lot better when they go into the pot. And I'll just sprinkle some down in there. They're going to really give the soup a nice color. In fact, they give the soup a nice color already. And then I can add some of this more inexpensive crab meat. Of course, you might want to just buy one of them and not have a mixture, but I'm going to add the inexpensive crab meat first to start to flavor the bottom of this pot. I'll just add that crab meat, stir it around. I can smell these great flavors coming together, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about Louisiana cooking is that we can really start to smell that flavor as it develops in the pot. Once that's stirred in, of course, I'm going to have to make a little roux, a little Cajun or Creole style roux. So I'll just dust some flour right down in the pot like this, a couple tablespoons. A tablespoon will thicken about a cup of cream or stock. So I'm going to put a couple different tablespoons in there, a couple sizes, and stir that around. And of course, you just want enough to pick up all of that butter. I'm making a white roux, basically. This is a white stock. So look at this. See how it really forms nicely? Look at that, all stuck together here, really good. Now, I'm going to add a touch of the stock again. I could use crab stock. I could use water. Any of those flavors will work well, but nothing better than just a little bit crab or chicken stock really works well in this soup because I'm going to add heavy whipping cream to it. Now, bring this to a rolling boil. It'll take just a couple of minutes, and let me add a little cream to it at this point. Bring the stocked up boil. It'll pick up all of those great flavors, and then I can add a touch of this nice heavy whipping cream. Use yogurt, use skim milk. It doesn't really matter, but just put some in there for that extra flavor. Stir that around. Then the crab meat. I'm going to add any amount of the crab meat I'd like, but I'm going to definitely save some right for the end before I serve. So I'll add this into the pot, and then the final ingredient, once it comes to a boil, will be the Brie cheese. I need a nice, soft cheese into the pot. It's going to really help to thicken the dish. As you can see, I'm going to add this in. And you can get Brie cheese anywhere. Of course, you can also use other cheeses too. You don't have to use the Brie. Just kind of fold it into the soup like this. Let it come to a rolling boil. The soup will start to thicken nicely with the roux and the cheese. All of the crab meat flavor will come together. And then right at the end, garnish with a little more crab meat and a touch of your own seasonings. I'll put a little Worcestershire, a touch of Louisiana pepper sauce, and then, of course, I can even throw in some nice little sprigs of thyme right into it. It's going to be a wonderful soup. It doesn't take very long to cook, just a couple of minutes, and you have a really, really nice presentation here. So that is the crab and Brie soup, and I'll just save that for later for us to eat. Now, what other dishes did I find at Layton Castle? Well, a couple of them. This really nice sauteed celery with a really great white sauce, and I put almondines on it. This was a dish that was served at a lot of the parties. Simple to make and found all over North Louisiana. In fact, they used to use thistles in the early days for this. And a pesto-filled, this is eggs Italian, a pesto-filled egg dish that was also used in some of those parties in that big old room overlooking the Washita River. Great dishes from Layton Castle. Well, I told you I had a good buddy coming to visit with me, Governor John McKeithen, coming into the kitchen to talk a little bit about Layton Castle and North Louisiana. And here he is. How you doing,
John,
Governor?
how you doing?
You're looking great. How you doing?
Those people at Layton Castle had you cooking for them, they never would have left.
Last time I saw you, you and I sat in my restaurant. We had a big plate of red beans. Remember that?
Yes, you did. I didn't know who you were. I looked over and that must be somebody important. Now, what are you eating? You said, you eating some beans. I said, can I have some? You said, yeah.
And I did. We ate a good
I
old
said,
pot
who
of
is that? I said, man, that's John Folse.
Well, I appreciate it. I knew who you were.
My wife knew you well. She's been watching your program.
I knew who you were. Yeah. Now, we also, right at the end of that plate of red beans, we had a nice big platter of fruit dessert because, you know, we always eat bread, pudding, and cheesecake. I have it right here. I want you to help me put it together so I can show them how we did it. In this big, pretty bowl here, we have, of course, I'm using some canned fruit. I have, this is the same thing we eat. We have some peaches, pineapples, fresh Louisiana blackberries. Look at here, some oranges, mandarin slices, cherries. Now, throw in those apples. The good thing about this is that we can mix fresh fruit. Oh, sure, throw them in there. A little bit. Fresh fruit and canned fruit really makes for a nice dish. I'm putting some pecans and strawberries in here. And then, of course, in my Pecan Ambrosia, as I call this dish, I always add some fresh shredded coconut. But you throw me in a couple big spoons of that whipped cream.
John, that's beautiful.
This is the dressing right there. Just throw in a couple big old spoons of that. You've done that before. I know your wife lets you in the kitchen every now and then. Okay, Governor, that's perfect right there. I would just swirl this around and I would put it into a really nice big bowl. I could even put some mint leaves on top of it, fold it all in, and this makes a really nice summer dessert to go out onto the swing or out onto the patio and eat a nice big bowl of this Pecan Ambrosia. Have a seat right there. Thank you for helping me with that. We want to talk a little bit about Louisiana. Now, you've been the governor here. Everybody knows you. Everybody knows the name Big John McKeithen. How did you get started in politics?
Probably more humbly even than you, John. I know you started at the bottom. I came back from World War II and elected the state legislature. I've discussed some of the men I met from your part of the state there. Distinguished names. And from there, I was elected to the Louisiana Public Service Commission. At that time, we only had 3 members on the commission. Now they have 5. Served there 10 years, and from there I was elected governor, and as you know, served there from 64 to 72.
Well, you know, every governor has a lot of accomplishments to their credit. I know that you certainly have a lot, but when you mention the name John McKeithen, a lot of people will instantly say Sunshine Bridge. Other people will say the Superdome. Everybody knows that was constructed during your administration. What's your, to your credit, what's the best?
Well, I'm proud that I played an instrumental role. I guess the proper way to say it about the Superdome, but more than anything else, I'm proud of the industry we brought to this state. From here to New Orleans, nearly 100 miles, actually industrial complex all the way down. And I'm prouder of the part I played in bringing that here than I am the Superdome or any other edifice that we may have built.
We're talking about plantations. We're talking about plantations, Layton Castle. You and your family actually live today on a plantation. Have you had it in the family for a while?
Yes, we do. We bought an old cotton plantation 40 years ago, my brother and father and I, and I moved down there shortly thereafter. My mother lives on it. She's 97 now. She lives on it now in the old plantation house.
The influence of early Louisiana plantations on the economy or on a governor's race, let's say, could you depend on going on to one of these big plantations and knocking on the door and knowing with the number of people working there, the influence of the owner of that plantation, did they carry enough influence to get a governor elected?
Probably did 100 years ago. But times, let's say, have changed. The plantation life was the economy of this state 100 years ago, or before the Civil War. Not true anymore. People who owned that land didn't realize that the real value of the land was under it in oil and gas. It wasn't on top where they could raise sugar cane and cotton and rice. But it's changed a lot. Now it isn't quite true. It's awfully good if you can get a plantation owner to be for you and be a leader, or if you're one, and you can convince the people that you don't feel like they're lower than you. If you can do that, as the Longs did down in South Louisiana and North Louisiana too, then you've got an extremely right position.
Well, I would imagine, because if you think of plantation culture in early Louisiana, you're thinking about 2,000 or 3,000 acres of land. Normally there's stores and buildings and manufacturing of sugar or cotton going on. I would imagine that there would have been a tremendous amount of influence, but I guess the point of, if the plantation owner was well liked in the community, he could probably deliver a few votes.
You have a man down in your country, Mr. Clarence Savoy, who I knew as a boy, young man in the legislature. His descendants are still there. He owned thousands of acres there, a tremendously successful sugar farmer. But he's a classic example that he's very active politically too, and very influential, I might add, in passing.
It was during your administration, as you say, a lot of things happened back then, but I think that was the period of time in Louisiana when the general economy switched from agricultural over to petrochemical. That's when the big chemical plants started. Were you responsible for that?
No, I wasn't. I was responsible to a great extent in getting the industrial development program started in this state. And then it just changed in itself. When they get so much money for plant sites, they couldn't compete. The sugar farmer couldn't compete with that. He'd have to sell his sugar land for industrial sites. And that made the big change from here to New Orleans particularly.
Well, I know that many of the large plantation homes, especially in my area of South Louisiana, around St. James Parish, around St. Charles, St. John, Ascension, so many of those large plantations converted to petrochemical and sold the houses. Many of those homes were torn down. I guess there was a negative impact as well.
I had an ideal situation from here to New Orleans, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, nearly 100 miles. One deep seaport, a harbor, from New Orleans up to Baton Rouge. No other state in the nation could offer that. As you know, it's navigable for deep vessels from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. And that, with the oil and gas we had here and the land right on the banks, protected by levees from flooding, an ideal situation.
So it was perfect. It was
That's
just a
correct.
perfect setting. Governor, I tell you, it really was a changing face of Louisiana, but I tell you, I think the state's a lot better off today because of it, and I want to thank you so much for coming to visit with me and sharing all of those great stories.
You. And thank you so much for what you're doing for our state.
Thank you, and thank all of y'all for coming to watch us do this, and tune in again as we continue to cook up more of these great Taste of Louisiana. The Governor and I are going to eat a little bit. Pork chops, come on over here and let's test it out. See if I did good.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Chef John Folse's Plantation Celebrations, Recipes from Our Louisiana Mansions, is a full-color 335-page book containing food history, recipes, and over 150 photographs from these southern landmarks. For your copy, send a check or money order for $28.50 to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 7860 Anselmo Lane, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Or use your credit card by calling toll-free 1-800-973-7246.